Local people have devised an ingenious, cost-effective method of having a cozy night. It's by setting the bed on fire.
The coldest nights ever recorded in northern China once revealed the limits of modern heating, as homes built on insulation and electricity surrendered their warmth within hours. Yet centuries earlier, during even harsher winters, engineers shaped brick, earth, and airflow into systems that endured without power, setting the stage for one discovery that still challenges our sense of progress. A world built on fragile warmth. Modern homes give the illusion of security because they rely on a constant stream of warm air pushed through ducts, powered by furnaces and electrical grids that appear stable until the moment they fail. These structures depend on insulation that merely slows the movement of heat rather than storing it, which means that the instant the supply of energy stops, the interior begins a rapid decline toward the temperature outside. A winter blackout becomes not just an inconvenience, but a structural revelation, exposing how little thermal resilience is built into most walls, floors, and ceilings. When temperatures plunge far below freezing, this fragility becomes even more apparent because lightweight materials such as drywall and fiberglass cannot hold meaningful heat, and therefore cool quickly once the heated air dissipates. The human body, which has limited tolerance for extreme cold, becomes vulnerable in a space that can no longer offer protection beyond a few hours. In these conditions, modern architecture reveals a paradox in which technological advancement creates dependency rather than durability. This contrast opens the path to examine how earlier civilizations confronted similar climates with far fewer resources, yet produced homes capable of maintaining warmth long after the flames that heated them had burned out. The climates that nearly broke civilizations. Centuries before central heating existed, vast portions of the northern hemisphere endured climatic swings severe enough to transform landscapes and destabilize societies. The period known as the Little Ice Age, beginning in the early 14th century, ushered in winters so prolonged that rivers froze solid, growing seasons collapsed, and hunger threaded its way through communities already stretched thin by disease and political upheaval. Written records from Europe describe markets held on frozen rivers and entire harvests lost to cold snaps that arrived earlier and lingered longer than anyone expected. Yet this was not the first time the world had confronted such relentless cold, since China had experienced an earlier climatic downturn known as the Wei-Jin Cold Period between the 3rd and 5th centuries. During that earlier era, temperature drops reshaped entire regions, prompting migrations, crop failures, and frequent struggles to maintain stable winter shelter. Chinese scholars and officials recorded these extremes with unusual precision, leaving behind descriptions of frost reaching deep into the ground and households burning fuel at unsustainable rates in attempts to keep living spaces livable. Rather than depending solely on fuel consumption, builders gradually refined architectural solutions that could trap, store, and release heat over long durations, allowing families to endure freezing periods with remarkable efficiency. By the time the Little Ice Age arrived centuries later, the accumulated knowledge from these earlier experiments had already become part of cultural memory, shaping construction traditions that favored thermal mass, controlled airflow, and resilient building geometry. These historical pressures did not simply influence architectural style. They created the conditions in which innovation was necessary for survival, setting the groundwork for the systems that would later define northern China's approach to winter housing. The Kang and the physics of heating the human. The architectural breakthrough that transformed winter survival in northern China emerged not from an attempt to warm entire rooms, but from a precise understanding of how heat behaves when absorbed into mass rather than air. This insight materialized in the Kang, a raised brick platform built with internal flue channels that guided hot exhaust through a controlled pathway before releasing it outside. The brilliance of this system lay in its ability to capture nearly all the usable energy from a cooking fire, storing that heat in several hundred kilograms of masonry and releasing it slowly through radiation long after the flame had died. Families gathered, worked, and slept on this platform, relying on the steady warmth that drifted from its surface in a way that aligned perfectly with the human body's need for consistent low-temperature heat rather than bursts of convection. Brick, clay plaster, and packed earth were arranged in layers that moderated temperature changes and prevented uncomfortable hotspots, allowing the platform to function as both a living surface and a thermal reservoir. This approach prioritized efficiency over spectacle, revealing an engineering philosophy that valued slow-release energy more than atmospheric heating, which would have quickly dissipated through drafty wooden structures. The Kong's effectiveness became so widely recognized that its underlying principles expanded beyond domestic life and into frontier environments where failure could be fatal. Archaeological excavations at Western Han-era military garrisons in the Juyan region uncovered large-scale hypocaust-style rooms built directly beneath soldiers' quarters, demonstrating that the concept of heating mass had been deliberately adapted to sustain troops living in some of the coldest desert climates in East Asia. These installations captured heat from charcoal fires and distributed it through subfloor chambers, providing stable warmth for an entire guardhouse with a remarkably small amount of fuel. This turning point illustrated that ancient engineers were not simply improving comfort, they were designing survival systems grounded in physics, capable of protecting communities and military units during winters that often stretched human endurance to its limit. Expansion of the system. As heating principles matured, builders expanded the concept of warming a confined surface into a method capable of transforming entire rooms. This evolution emerged in the Yodi system, where floors were elevated on short brick piers to create a hollow chamber through which heated air could circulate. Instead of directing exhaust beneath a single platform, engineers routed it along the entire underside of a stone or packed earth floor, allowing warmth to rise uniformly through the material and into the room above. The experience of walking across such a floor in midwinter, feeling heat radiate upward through polished stone or carefully plastered clay, signaled a profound shift in architectural thinking, since the home itself became an instrument for controlling temperature through design rather than through constant fuel consumption. Unlike the Roman hypocaust, which often placed the fire source inside living quarters and exposed occupants to soot and smoke, the Chinese variation separated the furnace from the inhabited space, which kept the interior clean while maintaining a steady draft that carried residual heat through the underfloor network. This arrangement allowed the system to function passively once ignited, relying on differences in air pressure rather than mechanical parts, and it produced an environment that remained warm long after the fire had burned down to embers. The refinement of Huodi expanded the possibilities for public and elite spaces, enabling palaces, reception halls, and administrative rooms to function comfortably through harsh winters. By turning radiant heat into an architectural principle rather than a luxury, designers demonstrated how structural form could shape microclimates capable of supporting social life, even in the coldest regions of the empire. The earth as shelter. While radiant floors and heated platforms shaped life above ground, some of the most enduring solutions to extreme winter conditions were carved directly into the landscape. On the Loess Plateau, where wind-deposited soil formed deep, easily excavated cliffs, families created yaodong dwellings that relied on the thermal stability of the earth itself. Several meters below the surface, soil maintains a nearly constant temperature throughout the year, which means that a home carved into this material begins each winter already insulated from the violent fluctuations of the outside climate. Instead of confronting temperatures that could drop far below freezing, these structures entered the season with a baseline that often hovered between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius, providing an immediate advantage before any firewood was burned. The walls, roofs, and floors of a yaodong were composed of thick earthen layers capable of absorbing heat slowly and releasing it even more gradually, creating an interior environment that resisted rapid cooling during blizzards or prolonged cold snaps. The arched ceilings added structural stability and encouraged even distribution of radiant warmth, while the compact geometry reduced the surface area through which heat could escape. Many complexes incorporated sunken courtyards called dongyuan, which captured sunlight during the day and sheltered entrances from direct winter winds, allowing passive solar gain to support the dwelling's thermal balance without mechanical intervention. Even when external temperatures plummeted, a Yaodong could remain significantly warmer for extended periods because the surrounding Earth served as a massive thermal reservoir. This approach demonstrated an advanced understanding of geothermal principles long before the concept had a modern scientific label, and it offered a level of environmental resilience that conventional lightweight construction cannot easily replicate. Consequences, and the return to forgotten resilience. The architectural wisdom that once protected entire regions slowly receded as modern technology reshaped expectations of comfort and efficiency, creating a world where warmth depended less on materials and more on machinery. Electrified heating and cheap fuel encouraged builders to abandon dense walls, earthen geometry, and passive thermal storage in favor of lighter structures that responded instantly to thermostats, yet lost their warmth the moment energy stopped flowing. As homes became easier to heat, they also became easier to render uninhabitable during a blackout, revealing how convenience can create fragility in ways few people consider until the cold exposes every hidden weakness. This shift did more than change construction methods. It severed the connection between shelter and environment, replacing centuries of accumulated knowledge with systems that function only when external infrastructure works perfectly. Yet today, as winter storms grow harsher and energy grids face increasing pressure, the principles once embedded in ancient Chinese engineering are reappearing in architectural research, sustainable design, and passive house development. Their endurance suggests that resilience does not always require advanced machinery, but rather a deeper understanding of how heat moves, how materials respond, and how a home can protect its occupants even when everything else fails. Ancient engineers crafted warmth from earth and stone, revealing how strength arises from simplicity rather than dependence. As today's winters grow harsher, their ideas feel newly urgent. If you'd like to follow more stories that reconnect modern life with forgotten ingenuity, stay with the channel and continue exploring with us.